All right, well, we're here with some guests. We're going to have a special whiskey episode. This podcast is going to cross some podcast lines. With us is Severin Henderson from Department 3C, a podcast. And next to him is Thomas Krull from Alpha Koncepts podcast. Both are featured here at Fire and Iron Media. And also in the studio today is Tony Staunton. You heard him on the L podcast on what wound up being another whiskey episode, but don't judge us. Woo. And Bill Besser, we're going to get into what he does and what he knows. And sitting here already, prior to setting up this podcast, he already dumped knowledge on us that was beyond what we were expecting. So thank you all for being here. This is going to be a great podcast. And also in the studio as a unsilent observer, Steve Gatewood.
Yeah, that's Department 3C's guest. So.
Right.
Thanks for being here.
So let's get started. So I want to start with you, Bill. Can you give us a little bit background? Because we're here to drink some whiskey and learn about booze and,
I'm just here for the whiskey.
Sample some of this. And then we're going to have Thomas go and we're going to play with guns afterwards.
No, absolutely. No.
So my background is I am a master brewer. I've owned a brewery in Massachusetts for about 15 years. I've also been recently in the last 10 years doing distilling and learning the arts of distilling and the differences with different brands of whiskey and the different types. What we kind of brought here tonight is, of course, Irish whiskey. And we're going to kind of cover the differences and ranges between just something called pot still, which is Irish moonshine. And what makes it a pot still, we brought Slane, which, of course, is a triple cask Irish whiskey. And it is distilled a little bit differently, and it's also aged differently. And then we brought Redbreast, which is also a pot still, but it is aged, and it has been barrel-aged, whereas the Teeling is not. And you'll get the differences in the flavors and the nuances of the types of barrels that it's aged in, and so forth.
Are these yours? Your recipes?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I wish I could claim Slane because it's fantastic, but no, I can't.
Fantastic.
So Redbreast is made and then it sits in barrels, and it's not the same with Slane and the other one?
Slane is barrel aged, but it's unique in the fact that it's something called triple cask, and I'll get into that.
Okay.
This pot still is just pure moonshine. It's Irish moonshine.
Irish moonshine.
This is how Irish whiskey got started. Mickey, it's the Irish word for whiskey is...
Ishkabaha. It means the water of life.
Yes, I will drink to that.
So this is the original Irish whiskey that was brewed back in... Can't remember from the history lesson that we did.
The Stone Age?
No,
Yeah,
it was,
7th century.
Yeah, pre-Victorian times. Slane is something modern. It's new, but it is a very unique whiskey in the fact that it's triple casked. And so this is actually aged in 3 different kinds of barrels, raw oak, whiskey barrel aged, and sherry barreled. And then it's mixed at the end. So it's a very unique way of doing things. You'll see other triple cask Irish whiskeys, but it's actually the same liquor. They just do it in 3 different kinds of barrels. This is done in 3 different barrels simultaneously and then blended at the end. Redbreast, 12-year-old, aged, barreled, just a beautiful... light-tasting whiskey.
Do you want my credit card now or later?
So, Bill, are these... you talked about that they're blended, but they're not considered blended whiskeys, right?
No. So, for example, if you look at the Slane, they do one whiskey. They brew one whiskey. It's barley. They use barley for a grain. And then they take that... the whiskey when it first gets out of the still, and they'll put it into 3 different barrels. Raw oak happens to be Jack Daniel's whiskey-aged barrels.
Okay.
And then sherry barrels. And at the very end, they'll take the 3 and blend it. Now, we did get to taste each individual ones last February. He would not tell us what the secret is of the amounts that he blends it with, but you can taste all 3 when you taste. When you taste whiskey, in the front of your tongue, you'll get the sweetness, you'll get some different flavors in the oak. And as it rolls past on the backside of your tongue, you'll start feeling the oak, and you'll get that woody flavor. So if you wanted, when you do tasting, you really want to bring it into your mouth and let it roll all the way down.
Okay.
So I just learned how to drink all over again. I'm with that.
Right. All right, so we're going to start with the teeling.
Starting with the
And
This
Irish
is teeling.
moonshine.
This is Irish moonshine.
and what are your personal thoughts about, like right now we're tasting, so we don't want to put any ice in here, right?
If you put ice on whiskey, it's just as good because it doesn't melt as fast, especially if it's a solid ice cube.
All right, get in there, Bill. All right.
The smell is
So what we're drinking is the Irish moonshine, right?
So this is pot still, and a pot still is just simply a big pot. You put grain in it, you add water, add yeast.
made in a bathtub.
You could do it in a bathtub. I prefer a closed container, though, because you want to keep the carbon dioxide and you want to keep the temperature between 50 to 65 degrees, or else the yeast dies.
Okay.
It's a lot sweeter than I thought it'd be.
Yes.
Tastes really clean to me. It tastes really simple. Tastes
Simple.
Yeah.
There's no column or distillation. It's just you boil off the alcohol at about 200 degrees. You don't want to boil the water. You just want to boil the alcohol. It goes up through a column, and when it gets to the very top of the column, it turns into liquid, and that's alcohol.
okay.
So the alcohol actually follows one path. It starts at the very bottom, comes up as a vapor, goes up to the top, comes out of a tube. There's no in a column distill, you will actually do that multiple times. So this is just Irish whiskey, Irish moonshine. It's made with barley. It's made with barley, no other grains.
Well, I like it. I mean, to keep it simple, I like it. I said it tastes simple. I like it a lot. It tastes just very pleasant. It's just basic. It's like it's here for you. It's like a nice sperm handshake.
It reminds me of the person who I said does a little bit of distilling on. Yeah, it reminds me of that.
But that's in the woods somewhere, right?
Yeah, we're gonna go with that. We're gonna go with
So
that.
the difference between moonshine that's made in America and what is made in Teeling in Ireland is Ireland does not have corn, so they use barley. And this is actually malted barley, and malted barley is barley that's been exposed to heat, and the grain actually starts to swell, and that gives it that little bit of a sweeter taste. In the U.S., moonshiner is made with corn, and they'll add sugar to accelerate the process and get more alcohol. The basic distilling process is the yeast. When you add water to grain, it turns into sugar. It actually releases the sugars from the grain. When you put the yeast in, the yeast converts the sugar to alcohol, and a byproduct of it is carbon dioxide. Okay, that's basic.
That's basic chemistry, right?
Basic chemistry.
Okay.
You can do this in your kitchen if you'd want, but
The
you will go
ATF
to
would
jail.
not like that.
No. Actually, it's kind of funny because Michigan, you can have a legal distillery for a $199 license.
Really?
You just can't be a felon.
Well, nowadays we have, you can home brew beer, and what makes the distinction where you cross the lines here is the amount of alcohol that's in the end product, or is it the way it's made?
It's actually the way it's made. So
you can brew beer all day long, but if you move into brewing alcohol,
When you distill it, that's when the ATF wants their money.
okay.
Michigan wants their money also if you have a distiller's license.
That's why you're paying the $200, the $200 to get going.
No, you're just paying the $200 to get registered so they know they come look at you and see how much you brewed because you got to keep track of it.
So it's just making
It's a
sure, just
license,
keeping track on you, just
Right.
to make sure you're not doing too much.
Brewing, you use a different kind of yeast, and you add hops. And hops is what preserves beer. So when you brew beer, you actually add preservation hops. It prevents it from spoiling, and then you add flavoring hops after you boil it. What you don't evaporate the liquid. You put it in a fermenter, and then you add the yeast, and that converts what they call wort to beer. In distilling, you're actually boiling the alcohol out of the mixture, and that's where the distilling comes from.
You're boiling the alcohol up, but you're capturing it on its way out, right?
Yeah. So it turns, you take a vapor, you're trying to burn it at 200
Condense
degrees,
it down.
and as it rises, it cools, and it turns into liquid, and it goes down a tube, and you collect the water.
And you just catch it.
So
catch it.
why we have you here, Bill? Can you just run us through the terminology really quick? What makes a bourbon a bourbon? What makes a whiskey? Like with the terminologies, I know like Scotch and bourbons are from where they're made. What other distinctions can be made with terminology here?
Scotch is Scotch, rye, bourbon, Irish whiskey is all whiskey. It's made with a grain. It's made with a yeast. Rums are typically made with sugar only.
But bourbons themselves, like you can't make bourbon in Scotland. You can.
I could if I used Kentucky water and Kentucky corn.
Which would be incredibly expensive to have shipped over
but
there.
stuff like that is what makes the distinction. Like this is a bourbon. When you go buy a bottle of bourbon, that's what you're getting, right?
Right. Kentucky bourbon is very unique in the fact that because Kentucky has a lot of limestone, they'll actually pump water into the ground in what is called a natural aquifer, and then take the water out of the natural aquifer, and the water comes out a perfect balanced pH of 0.
That was my question, because I heard you say the pH was different on the Kentucky water.
Yes, it comes out 0.
Okay.
And that's what makes bourbon, because of the water they use and the corn.
Now, do you think the big brewers who are putting out hundreds of gallons an hour, do you think that they are altering their water pH using a water that is different and then adding or subtracting chemicals, bases, and alkalines to make it what it needs to be?
I would hope not, but it's large corporations, so
Yeah, exactly my point.
it's whatever they want to do.
That's whatever.
Well,
right,
just like
whatever they
everything
can
else,
do.
like you want to start with really good ingredients, whether you're, cooking, baking, or whatever. And I imagine it's the same with alcohol. If you're starting with really good ingredients, you're going to get a better product.
If you're going to be consistent in either brewing or distilling, your grain has to be the same all the time. So you want to buy from the same farmer.
Grown on the same farm, because
grown on
if
the
it's
same
different
farm.
dirt, it's going to have a different flavor.
That's correct. If you're going to do that, you want to blend. So if you're buying from 5 different, you want to blend the same 5 different farmers' grains into one. But it has to be consistent. Any change in grain, any change in water is going to affect the flavor, the final flavor. So it has to be very quality controlled.
So that all speaks to the recipe that you're putting out, that you're making for each person, because that's another thing. When we were pre-talking, you were talking about different recipes. So water is definitely part of it.
Water is definitely part of it. The type of grain that you use is definitely part of it. And also if it's malted or unmalted. So unmalted grain is just raw grain. They take it off of the field, you bring it in, you put it in a silo, you add it to your water, or you add it to your mash. You make a mash out of it, basically. Mm-hmm. If you use malted barley, it gets a different flavor. And the reason why a lot of Irish whiskeys went away from malted, because England was taxing malted grain.
England was taxing. Wow,
Yeah, the
what
dirty limeys.
Imagine that.
So they couldn't control the liquor because they didn't know how much people made. But they could control the grain. So they were taxing the grain. So they started taxing malted barley. So you had to buy malted barley, you had to pay a tax on it. So these Irishmen, shall we say, inspirational, decided that they'll use unmalted grain, and it came out the same way. And this is actually
They
unmalted
mixed
grain.
it. I think some of them, it was a blend.
Yeah, some of it's a blend, but this is unmalted grain. This is just raw barley.
So what's the relationship with Old English fine malt liquor?
Also
Most
a
likely
fine
Irish
blend.
whiskey rebranded. Scotch is the same thing. It's blended from, they'll use rye or barley. But the thing with Scotch is they actually blend. So they'll buy
Yeah,
different.
if they don't get the barley that they like, they'll actually get it from Ireland.
Yeah.
If they're not happy with it,
So if they're not happy with the taste that comes out,
they'll buy barley from Ireland until they get the right flavor profile.
okay.
But there is a new whiskey coming from my hometown called Waterford, And what they're doing is they're making all, like what you were saying about terroir. They're actually making every bottle has like the name of the farm and the farmer where the barley came from. So they're trying to establish that, because like when you drink cognac, like they know where the grapes came from. But for some reason with Scotch and Irish whiskey, they don't have it defined. So he's one of the first guys to do it. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out.
Well, you look at Jack Daniels and Jim Beam. They actually buy all their grain in Kentucky, but they have their own farms. So they're
corporations that large are going to have their own.
I don't know about water. I don't know about water since all their bourbon burned up. They had that big fire.
Yeah, that's right. What was that last summer or 2019?
Yeah, all the storage bins burnt. So I'm not sure what they're doing now. Smaller brewery or smaller distilleries in Kentucky, like Barton's, for example, they have very good quality control. They own their own farms. They own their own water. Everything comes from their aquifer that they own. The distiller is very anal to the point of being OCD about his quality of his ingredients.
Well, that's what you want, though. Really, if you want your lead guy to have that quality,
they don't do Jack Daniel's quantities,
of course,
or Jim Beam's. Smaller. They're called small batch bourbons, and to me, the small batch bourbons are just fantastic.
Well, but also there's a difference in price, because take, for example, retail here in Chicago, Jim Beam is going to run you like $19 for a bottle, and Jack is probably going to be $22 for a bottle. But I'm sure some of these bottles that we're drinking are upwards, $40 easy.
I will tell you that Slane is about 25.
Really? We haven't got there yet, so I should.
This is about 60. Okay. To me,
so the moonshine is 60.
The one brewed in the bathtub is $60.
$60, right?
But to me, this is a better Irish whiskey.
What constitutes how expensive whiskey is? In this case, you have something that's triple cast, triple distilled, and it's cheaper than
what they want to sell it for.
Really?
If I can add, it's a capitalist society, whatever the buyer is willing to pay.
So you really shouldn't judge your whiskey based on price.
It's not based on price. You really should do it on taste.
Okay.
So you got to buy a bunch of whiskeys and drink them all.
Oh no! Come to Irish whiskey tastings or whiskey tastings.
No, I like you really got to buy a bunch of whiskeys and drink them all. Drink them with friends, though.
Yeah.
Well, while we're, while we have you guys here, Severin, why don't you tell us about your podcast while we're all together here? You actually record in the Fire and Iron Studios right here in this very studio.
Absolutely.
And we just did one this afternoon. Give us a little rundown on what people can expect to hear from Department 3C, a podcast which we talked about really has no rules.
Yes, my podcast has no rules. My podcast, Department 3C Presents a Podcast, is a show about any and everything. It's a show hosted by me. I'm a first responder. I'm a firefighter, and former paramedic, former police officer, all of the above. I've worked in every realm in the arena of public safety, and it's just a show from the mindset of that. I try and make sure every show is somehow, some way connected to fire, and sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, but that's what my show is generally about. It's about public safety, getting mindset, motivation, public speaking, it's a blend of different things. It's a blend of different shows, and it's my passion project to get a message of positivity out to the world.
Okay.
So earlier tonight, before we got on the air, you were talking about special training for high rises.
Yes, I was.
And how long is that general order? How many
What'd you
pages?
say?
How many pages is that general order?
18 at the last time I looked at it, and it's going to be another revision of that order. It's the high-rise order. We were just studying for promotional tests. We still are. We're always studying for promotional tests. And with that being said, we have to know those orders backwards and forwards and back, because we often get fires in high rises, and those are some of the most dangerous fires. Regular structure fires, a lot of times you can deploy a few different tricks. I mean, if you're not that high, you can kind of go to a window, hang out, somebody can come get you. If you have a fire in a high rise, especially here in the city of Chicago, where our high rises are upwards 70, 80 floors, I don't think you want to be hanging out on the 80th floor or the 90th floor of a building saying, hey, come help me, come get me. So we just have to deploy different tricks. I don't want to call them tricks, tactics. We have to deploy different tactics to save ourselves and save the citizens of the city of Chicago.
Who was your most interesting guest so far? How long we been doing this?
It wasn't me, was
6
it?
months?
Right, that was the thing.
That was a good podcast. That was a good podcast.
My partner that I brought with me, he's been a guest on my show. Tom's been a guest. Tony's been a guest. Vince was a guest. I have two so far. My one episode where I had a buddy of mine, Michael Spencer. That's my most recent episode where he kind of talked about his story going from being not alive to being alive and thriving and being a nice, good person that's contributed to society. And my other episode I had early on was my human trafficking episode. And a lot of people hit me and liked that one. They said, I never knew this much stuff was going on in the world of human trafficking. I said, neither did I. So
that's why you wanted to have him on the podcast.
That's why I wanted to have him on. That's why I said my show is kind of a mix-up of a lot of different things. Like you said, there are no rules on my show.
Well, I think you picked two that I probably would have picked if you would have asked me to.
Thank you.
The one with Spencer, if you want to listen to an inspirational story, listen to Mike's story from start to finish. This guy goes from being, like a stud in the fire department, and that's all he wanted to do. He has a setback health-wise. He basically goes into heart failure, and he's feeling like crap for a while, and finally they, it's going to take us a long time for us to admit that something's wrong and actually go to the hospital. So they finally, that should be a testament on how bad he was feeling, that he was like, okay, I think it's time to go to the hospital. And he didn't get there, he should have got there a couple days before he actually went there, because he winds up being in heart failure, and the doctor's like, how are you alive?
How are you even alive?
How are you walking around right now? And he fights back, and, they got to a point where he was just going to have to carry this box to keep his heart going for the rest of his life.
LVAD.
And against the cardiologist, against all these advanced medicine guys, he's like, I don't want to do that. We have to have some other way. They're like, there is no other way. He talks him into it, and he's out there, and he's back to being a stud again. And but his journey there is crazy. All this ridiculous stuff happened. And it was a crazy
reaction.
Story. Yeah,
like you said, the box he had to carry.
He goes
around,
he goes to get a CAT scan. Was it?
Yep.
And
getting a CAT scan.
The dye that they injected him with, all of a sudden his lips start swelling up.
I bet you can't eat shellfish either.
I don't know.
You know what? I didn't ask him that. I needed you.
Where were you?
Because it's iodine-based dye, I would imagine, right? And iodine.
It's called sodium
shellfish.
hypate. And if you're allergic to shellfish, you'll be allergic to the dye.
Yeah. So, you picked two of the good ones that, for all of you guys listening, and you want to, tune into a new podcast, definitely start with those ones and work your way back. Because I think all of them were great, but those two definitely
stick out.
What about you, Thomas? You've had some pretty amazing guests on your show. Tell us a little bit about the background of your podcast.
Why do you have to put me on the hot seat, Vince?
Hey, it's time. You sit there and you put everybody else on the hot seat.
I do. That's what I'm good at.
Yeah.
So, as you alluded to earlier in the podcast, we're going to get drunk and shoot guns, and I threw a hissy fit to that one. My podcast, the Alpha Koncepts podcast, is all about the gun culture. Myself as a firearm instructor of 7 years, we're just sharing the knowledge and talking to different people across the gun culture. Manufacturers and dealers and new gun owners. And I think you asked me, what about me? And I'm assuming you're going to ask what podcast sticks out. But the New Gun Owner podcast was, I think, a great one to shed a lot of light to people who don't really understand all of the hurdles and the hoops that gun owners have to jump through. And they talk about, you can just, anyone can get a firearm, anyone can get a gun. Former President Obama said it's easier to get a gun than it is to rent a book from the library, and that just simply absolutely is not so. And the New Gun Owner podcast, which was the second podcast we put out really sticks out in my mind as being one of the better podcasts because of just the amount of knowledge that the two guests just simply sharing their story, you know, waiting weeks and months for, okay, so I have to get this and that's going to take me months, and then I have to get that and that's going to take me weeks, and it's, you know, 6 months before they can actually own a gun. And if someone is going to, you know, they wanted the guns, both of the guests, for protection.
Right,
they
and
were
what inspired
scared.
them to go down that route? Like, why are they now becoming gun owners?
Right.
That was interesting part of it, because they were very
Absolutely.
different
There's-
reasons.
Right, and they were across the country too. We
Yeah.
had one from New Jersey and one from Joliet, which is right outside Chicago, but they were both afraid because of the things that are going on in our nation and the civil unrest. And, you know, here are two people who never really thought they needed a gun, and both completely unique individuals from different walks of life decided that now is the time to take their own personal protection seriously. I really think that that podcast, they were all great. I mean, we had the Lyman guest who was the manufacturer for reloading equipment, and the information he had was awesome. And the most recent podcast of the Big Sky Cigars, you know, I enjoyed speaking with him because, you know, they're just good people, honest, you know, sportsmen, and they're trying to run a business and go after, you know, the average Joe, the average person. And that was a good podcast as well. They've all been great, but again, the new gun owner one just definitely stands out in my mind.
You know which one I took the most information from was when you had Masad Ayub.
Oh yeah, Masad Ayub. I mentioned Bill here, our whiskey aficionado, is an encyclopedia, but Masad Ayub, when it comes to personal protection and self-defense, unsurpassed knowledge. I mean, it's like he's got a bajillion terabytes worth of information on that subject. Hard to beat, and if you can ever listen to anything that he puts out, and definitely go back and listen to that podcast.
I tell people, if you own a firearm, you need to listen to that podcast.
Absolutely.
There are things in there that he said that I would never have thought about, but this guy is basically a hired gun for people who are on the receiving end from the government, who are trying to basically jam somebody up for, you know, defending themselves with a firearm. And they kind of, is he hired by the NRA to?
I don't think he has an affiliation with the NRA. Actually, a few weeks after we did the podcast with him, he was named the president of the Second Amendment Foundation, which was, you know, I think he's a good fit for that. He is what's known as an expert witness. So if you find yourself in a situation where you've had to use force to defend yourself,
this guy's the guy you want in your corner.
He's been
sure.
doing it since the 70s. I don't think there's many people, if any, that have as much experience as him. Between the cases he's been on, as well as, you know, his network of other expert witnesses that share that information, you know, he's able to cite this, that, and the other and talk. He can talk. We probably could have done a 10-hour podcast just on the Zimmerman case, and that's one case, you know. Just the subtle nuances of every single angle that a prosecutor might try to throw at you, and, you know, he's like, let's say he's like Babe Ruth, and he knows how to swing the bat when the pitcher throws a curveball or throws a fastball. And that's, you know, again, you know, he's an expert witness. He's going to testify on your behalf, because a good lawyer is not going to want you to testify, because a good prosecutor is going to get you jammed up on your words and make you say something you don't mean to say. So you need someone that has that background, who can scientifically point to facts and knowledge.
Well,
and that's who he is.
To that point, one of my biggest takeaways from that when he was on was, he said, if you're involved in a firearm incident, when the police interview you, they're going to ask you, how far away was he? And Masad Ayub said, don't give them any distance. Don't say he was 10 feet. He was about 12 feet. Because they're going to go and they're going to measure that out exactly. And if you're estimating 10 feet and now he's 8 feet, they're going to play that against you. He said,
all of a sudden you're a liar.
Right. He said, tell them he was close enough that I feared for my life. And just like that, you know, terminology and the way that he's telling you to, I was like, man, that makes so much sense. Like, something so small like that could be the difference with, basically you going to jail for defending your life.
And the fact of the matter is, everything he's recommending comes from real life cases that he's been on or that he's familiar with.
So on the other side of that, there's in South Carolina, there's a city solicitor, same thing as a DA is here, who took all his police officers and sent them to training school and acting school, so that when they give testimony, they give it accurately, and they do it with such emotion.
Really?
Right. And he
And it's
actually
dirty,
trained
in
his
my
officers. It's
Yeah,
dirty.
I was just about to ask you guys, in your opinion, is that dirty?
But
100%,
You do.
100%
Severn?
dirty.
Dirty?
Yeah, that's a little. That's
Okay, well,
personalized.
let's play devil's advocate here. Is it dirty if they're using that same acting and that same coercion, let's call it,
I don't think you would-
to prosecute
I
somebody
don't
that
think
we
you
know
would find
is
Masad Ayub trying to play on an emotional heartstring. He's going to come there with knowledge and facts, and he's not going to be dramatic about it.
sure. I mean, this guy's all business.
All business.
All business. And like I said, if I ever in trouble, Thomas, if you ever read the news and I'm in trouble, get my side.
Call him up.
Call him up. Tell,
Get him on
tell him
the
I need
line.
you, big guy. Bring it.
1-800 Masada, right?
There you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna see him walk in, and I'm just gonna kick back.
Yeah, it's gonna be all
It's
right.
gonna be all right.
But I want to add, obviously a professional like that isn't going to come cheap, and so it behooves anyone who takes their personal protection seriously to consider self-defense insurance. And I'm not gonna
You don't like using that term insurance, though.
Right. Insurance has a legal connotation that people, obviously an insurance company has requirements, and there are certain companies that are considered insurance, and there are certain companies that are considered legal defense policies or prepayment. But whatever you do choose, you probably do want to have some type of prepaid legal service, self-defense insurance, whatever terminology you want to use. And yes, I do try to avoid insurance because most of the companies aren't true to definition insurance companies. You want to have that on your side because, if you're talking about bail, $5,000 to $10,000, you're talking about your retainer fee, $5,000 to $10,000. And if it actually goes to trial, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay for your lawyer and your expert witnesses and all of that. It's just something for everyone to consider. And it's a sad reality of the world that we live in, but it is what it is. That is the world that we live in. And you can throw your hands in the air and say it shouldn't be like this, and it shouldn't, but it is.
But it is. Right.
Don't you say that isn't one of your phrases, every bullet comes with a lawyer attached to it?
Absolutely. Every bullet that exits your gun has a lawyer attached to
Are
it.
you surprised that I remember all these?
I'm not. You know what? I'm actually impressed. It tells me, the fact that you're able to recite from my podcasts, from Severn's podcasts. It tells me that you're actually listening. So thank you.
I am listening, man. I am listening. You know what? To do what I do with you guys and here with you guys, if I'm not into it, if I'm not captivated and is interested in your topics, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Sure.
I sought you guys out. Like me and Severn started a conversation. Tom, I made a phone call to you, and I'm so glad that you guys are with us. It means a lot, and as this company grows, we're all going to grow, and I can't, thank you guys enough for being here.
Well, I for one appreciate you having me and giving me the time because I call you up and say, "Hey, I got an idea." You say, "Come on in."
I try to make it as easy, if I'm there, if I got nothing, if I can clear the schedule, by all means. There's a handful of things that would keep me, but anything else, I'll clear the schedule for you. Well, enough about us. Let's
Back
see
to the booze?
Yeah. Well, let's before we get into our next deep dive here, let's go to our next deep dive of the next liquor. So, Bill, what do we got going on here?
So the next one is Slain, and I'm going to give you a little bit of history to all those who U2 music. Their first album was recorded at Slane Castle.
Consuming much slain whiskey.
No, that's back before they actually started brewing whiskey or distilling whiskey. But what's interesting is the guy who does, it's Alex Cunningham. He's the Lord's son and soon heir to the title. During the recording of the first album, U2 thought the castle was haunted because they would tune their instruments at night and they go to bed and they come up in the morning and the instruments have moved and detuned. It was actually him and his sister going down and playing with the instruments after everyone went to bed. So there's a history behind this. Slain is something recently on the market, 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, I think about 2.5 years.
2.5, 3
Is
years.
Slane,
Oh, you're right. It's 3 years. Actually, it was their birthday a while ago.
Yeah. It is very unique in the fact that it's triple cast. And they did something different that nobody else has done. And as I said before, they actually aged the same liquor in 3 different barrels. So you get raw oak, you get whiskey aged barrels, and it happens to be Jack Daniels. And that's just because the owner who owns Slane also owns Jack Daniels, so he gets the barrels.
Well, that's
directly.
very convenient.
And sherry. They actually distill the sherry. They throw the sherry away just to get the barrels.
oh, they don't even sell the sherry.
The barrels
it's
worth
just to season
100
the
times
barrels.
more than what the sherry is.
Wow.
Wow.
That seems like a waste. I don't know what sherry is, but it sounds
It's
like
a fortified
delicious.
wine. It's a fortified wine.
So it's like
very sweet.
cooking, right?
It's like cooking wine,
Oh.
but it's
But
sweet.
you can have like really expensive like.
They do have very expensive sherries.
Yeah,
yes.
there's like it's like dessert wines. There's
Yeah.
some sherries that are dessert wines. They're super good.
Yeah, like $45,
They're
$50 a
thick,
glass too.
You know,
a
and
shot.
Yeah.
if you roll them around in the glass, you can see the sugar still.
The legs,
yeah.
right? Come down.
They're-
So, but they I think they own the sherry company that they just get the barrels from because the barrels are worth more than the thing.
I think that's we
More
gotta
than
find
sherry.
it. We
Now, the
our
whiskey
new
barrels-
When
company.
they're dumping it,
Yeah,
find out
our
when
new
they're dumping
company.
it. Say, hey, I'll take it.
Fire and Iron Sherry.
Now, what's unique about this is that they actually only use the barrels once
Really?
because once you take the flavor out of them, it's gone.
That's interesting too. I didn't
Okay.
know that.
Now,
Okay.
Jim Beam reuses barrels. They also sell them. Technically, you're supposed to use a fresh barrel every time to be bourbon whiskey. Some companies get around that. So anyway, and then they blend it. They won't tell you what the blend is, but they had a what they call a deconstruction here at
Like a
Heritage.
reverse engineering.
Yeah, and they actually brought the 3 different ones in and let us taste each one, and then taste the combined. But like I said, he wouldn't tell us what the ratio was.
But
they make
that's
crispy.
what really makes Slane is that ratio, right?
Yes, that ratio.
Okay.
Yeah. This is actually somewhat of a unique taste and unique flavor because it also mixes well with other things. So, like, you can make Irish coffee with it. You can make.
We should put the microphone next when he's pouring because it's
Yeah.
a delicious sound.
It is a delicious sound.
This is as I said, this is a blend. It's called triple cask.
So should we go through the whole process? Like we should smell it.
Smell it.
Okay,
Swirl it around.
so-
You can smell the sherry. The sherry comes out very
The
distinctly.
sherry's that sweetness that we're smelling, right?
Yeah, that's what I smell first is the sweet.
It smells so much better than the bathtub whiskey.
Yes, of course. The whiskey's been aged
I love
for
it.
4
Great.
years.
I love your honesty. It's very refreshing.
So it's been actually aged 4 years and then blended and then bottled and sold.
So 4 years in whiskey time is nothing, right? That's
It's the minimum.
It's the minimum.
It's
Okay.
the minimum.
what were you saying about 364 days or something like that?
Ireland is 3 years in a day. or
3 years in a day.
That's the minimum for it to be an Irish whiskey.
Okay.
Yeah, except now the pot still's not aged.
Well, that would have to be at least. It would still have to be 3.
Sitting in the bathtub for 3
So
years, guys. Come on.
when you say age, it age the clock on aging starts after that 3
Yeah,
years.
they put into most of the Irish whiskeys are all ex-bourbon casks, and they just put them away for a couple of years and.
They have to rotate them. No,
All
they
barrel.
have to be barrels.
Because that's where you get the color from and everything like
and
that.
a lot
right?
of the flavor, like the fruitiness of certain woods.
The oakiness.
So let's talk about the different. So like raw oak, basically just takes a lot of the acid, the acids that are out of the whiskey. But you
So
can taste
these-
raw oak.
What you're saying is the oak is actually sucking acid or whatever out of the liquid.
Yes, it
And so
doesn't
it's-
add anything.
It doesn't impart any.
Doesn't impart anything.
Other
It
than
just takes
color?
it out.
It's
Other
more
than
of a
color.
filter, huh?
Really?
It's a filter.
It's more of a more
Wow.
of a filter
Yeah,
than
that's-
an additive.
So
I'm
the
glad I'm here today.
We are
So
doing some
the
learning.
We're
charcoal
learning, right?
the charcoal barrels take out more of that, so you get much
The
more.
charcoal
of
is the burnt. Well, they'll take
burnt.
the oak and they'll pre-burn
You
it.
just pre-burn it,
Right.
and that actually takes more of it out. Raw oak, you get it will give it a little bit of the oak flavor because you do get some of the enzymes out of the oak. You do get some of the oak flavor, but for most part, it's just color. and it takes something out. Now, a sherry barrel, because it's been used to brew sherry, actually imparts the sherry sugars.
Right, because it has that in the wood already.
And the wood.
This one tastes
What was the
much
third one
sweeter.
again? What was the third
Raw
barrel?
oak, whiskey aged
Oh, okay.
whiskey
So
barrels.
What is the whiskey doing? Is it imparting?
It does have some of the flavor because in order to ship barrels from the U.S. to Ireland, they have to keep the whiskey in it because it'll dry out and crack. So they don't take all the whiskey out. That keeps, and they have to roll them. They actually have to roll the barrels.
What is the angel share? That's just the evaporation?
No, the,
What's that? Can you explain that to us? Because I've
Sure.
heard about it, and I never really got an actual answer. But
a distiller will take and he'll sample every barrel every year or every 6 months.
Or every day.
nope, not ready.
You won't have much liquor left if you do that. But he'll pick certain barrels that have a unique flavor because either the oak is different or the charcoal is different or whatever. And he'll mark that. Those barrels is what they call the angel cut. And that's just a different barrel.
Oh, so the angel cut is just something that he's marking as this one.
This
has
is mine.
something-
Put it
This
in the
is
back of my
something
truck.
special.
Oh, I thought there was something like they lose, like the liquor loses a percentage of volume,
It does.
and that's
It
what
does.
they call
But-
the angel
And then
share.
they have the devil's cut, which is what's left in the barrel when they take everything else out.
Okay.
Oh,
Because they have two different distillers that have that as the name of the
The devil's cut.
yeah. The
It's a great
devil's-
Jim
marketing.
Beam, I
It's a
think, has
great
devil's
marketing
cut, right?
concept, isn't it?
Oh, they have.
So the actress they
I'm about to
use
say
for
they have a
that.
great actress on the commercial. She sells it just her alone. So
Yeah,
Oh,
it's,
that's-
it's great
that's a girl
because they
from,
charge
that
you about
70s
10
show.
15%,
Yeah,
and it's the same liquor that you're drinking out of the beginning because there's no way to determine the difference.
yeah.
What's left in the bottom of the barrel is called lees or dregs, and it does have some pulp in it from
Throw
the
it
wood.
through a
and-
coffee filter and enjoy.
Yeah, that's basically what. the
Is there
devil's cut
anything that's done with that stuff at the bottom?
No, usually they leave them in the barrels so the barrels don't dry out and they sell them. So breweries right now, the biggest thing is barrel aged beer. Barrel aged beer. Oh my
Yeah.
God, they sell a barrel
Well, I
for
think that's what you.
$400.
Isn't that what that Founders was? Isn't that
Yeah, that's barrel
that beer
aged.
that you guys are drinking right there? I think that's brewed in a barrel.
No, that's just Scotch style ale.
Oh,
It's just
Scotch ale.
So
Okay.
It's barrel-aged wine now.
Really?
I just picked up 2 years ago. Robert and Davy and another.
Yeah, but the barrel aged that they do wine is raw oak. They won't do that with whiskey barrels.
Let me ask you a question. We were talking about when we talked about the moonshine, and maybe even before the pre-talk. You were mentioning how you're boiling the mash, and that evaporates the alcohol. And there's that old saying that moonshine will make you blind. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is not based on any educated opinion. Methane burns off at a slower, lower temperature than alcohol, so the methane burns off first. And if you capture that and bottle it, that's what you're actually drinking, and that's what makes you blind. Is that just a wives' tale, or is
No,
that
I
true?
used to blind because they used to use radiators, and what they're doing is going blind from the lead.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So,
you go.
so bathtub brewing is not advised. But the methane, you don't want to consume the methane.
So-
Don't you let the first little bit drip off before?
Now, so let me explain the difference
please.
between a pot still and a columnar still. Swain is columnar stilled. A columnar still is much taller. In fact, it's could be as high as 90 feet. In the case of Swain, they have 3 columns that feed each other. What happens is each level of the columnar still has a different temperature of cooling in it. They use just water. So as the alcohol rises, it cools. Heavier alcohols will actually cool first, drop back down in, and then reboiled or re-vaporized.
Okay.
That's called columnar distillation. At the very top, what you're getting is the very light alcohol that you want to drink. So that's the reason you use a columnar still.
So everything I
more
just said
pure.
is false.
It's more
That's a
pure.
very polite way of saying
That's
you're
what I was
wrong.
about to say. That's what I heard. He just said it in a really nice way.
You're wrong.
You're a gun guy. You know.
Yeah, stay in your lane, buddy.
No, but a columnar still, the alcohol that you get out of a columnar still is much more pure. And you burn off all the other waste types of alcohols that either affects flavor or is bad for your health and so forth. Moonshine is just pure alcohol. Right now, of course, they don't run it through radiators because they've learned that lead and solder is not good for you. So they try to do copper.
Well, they do sell silver solder for all you
Want to be distiller.
backyard. Yeah.
Right. Now I have a question. We were talking about the mashes, sour mash, and what's the definition and what makes a sour mash and all of that fun stuff.
So mash is just any kind of grain with water in it,
Okay.
and you add yeast in order to turn the mash into alcohol. Sour mash is actually grain that's gone bad. It has a sour flavor, and you could add an enzyme to do that. And it has a different type of flavor. So when you get sour mash whiskey, it tastes totally different than you get mash whiskey.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I want to taste the sour mash to see if I can taste the difference.
It's rotted whiskey.
It's
But
not
they
really
still sell
rotted.
it.
It just turns sour. It has a sour taste. If you taste the liquid out of it, it tastes like sugar. It has a sour, kind of a sour taste. They put an enzyme in to do it.
Well, Bill, let's get in. Like, how did you get into this? Like, give us a little background on you.
I've always been a distiller or a brewer.
Where did you start? Where did you?
At South Carolina in Charleston. I got very interested in how to brew beer because I got very tired of Budweiser and Miller and so forth. I could drink a Budweiser and I'll get a headache. And the reason is because they don't naturally carbonate. They don't have time. So what they do is they add carbolic acid in the bottling process.
Is that what gives you the hangover?
That's what gives you the hangover.
Get out. I thought the hangovers were from the impurities and the sugars.
No, it's really just from the carbolic acid they use to carbonate the beer. So I got interested in it. I had some time on my hands, so I actually went to Germany and became a master brewer. So I actually went and took a course.
That is some real time.
Yeah, define time. How long? I mean, you're saying become a master brewer. I'm thinking like 10 years.
No, it's a year. You go to school.
Oh, okay.
You actually go to school in Germany. You become a master brewer. You get certified and licensed.
At any particular brewery?
It's not a brewery. It's actually a course that they issue or they offer in certain universities in Germany. They don't do it in the U.S.
Because that's like the major leagues of beer brewing, right? To learn from them.
You learn from them, but you also learn all the differences in the different yeasts. There are over 70 different yeasts you can use to brew beer, over 150 different hops. And the combination of hops and yeast is what gives you the flavor of the beer. It also controls the amount of alcohol. So for like an IPA, India Pale Ale, everyone brews it. It's a day and a half in a fermenter. That's it. One kind of grain, barley, malted barley. That's it. Anybody can do it. You can do it in your backyard.
My 8th grade science project was brewing wine, and the whole point was, okay, yes, we know how to brew wine, but we're going to add more and less sugar and see if we can make it stronger or weaker.
So
This was 8th grade?
That was 8th grade. That was
When did they let you back into school?
changed.
After they kicked you out?
So
St. Cornelius, they're out of business now.
So let me go back a little bit further. Actually, when I was about 14, I used to be the PJ master, and it was something called Purple Jesus, and it's a fruit punch. And I lived on an island, and of course all the teenagers on Saturday night would go to one end of the island, which was uninhabited. We'd drop our keys in a mailbox, and at 10 o'clock, the sheriff would come around, take the keys, lock the mailbox, and that was it. So if you were there at 10, you couldn't leave. And we pretty well policed ourselves. Nobody got pregnant. Nobody got in trouble. No fights got started. And we used to brew this stuff called PJ, which is basically fruit punch with alcohol in it. And I took it up.
I'm familiar with that.
I took a notch up because I actually started to ferment it and distill it. And so I had this Purple Jesus that was about 26% alcohol. Mm-hmm. My dad, who was a retired career Army officer, taught at the Citadel. And he came in one day in the garage, and I had like 6 50-gallon plastic trash cans fermenting in the garage. And he said, son, you can go to jail for this. It's called bootlegging. And I said, yes, sir, Dad.
But we're making so much money.
No, the theory behind brewing, and I've said this my entire life, is the reason you brew beer or you distill liquor is to guarantee it separates a woman in her panties. So that's the story of that. In 2000,
Where
actually,
can we get these brewing kits? In
1990, I opened a brewery in North Adams, Massachusetts. It was a very depressed town. I had a partner who was from that area. And we just got to fun of having to brew beer. And we came up with a recipe called an Irish cream stout. We took it to one restaurant bar. I I think I brewed 10 barrels the first time.
So you were the first ones who make an Irish cream stout?
Not the first.
Okay.
But we had a recipe that everyone liked. It sold well. People bought the hell out of it. So we decided to open a brewery.
Can you give us an example of like a commercialized Irish cream stout that we have maybe heard of?
Wow. Commercialized. That's hard.
Like something that we would.
What's
we would
something
know.
a lot of people, a lot of listeners would have heard of?
Or even give us your name.
It's Berkshire Brewing. They still do the recipe. They've been doing it for now since 2003, so it's 17 years they've been brewing it. They brew the same recipe though. It's pretty automatic.
What makes it a cream stout?
The secret.
Oh, that's the secret?
No.
Okay.
Anytime you hear anybody call a cream finished beer, what they've done is they've added rice to the grain.
Oh, okay.
So rice is sweet, and rice adds a sugary kind of a sweetness to the grain, and that's what makes it cream finished. Typically stouts, when you do brewing, you use grain, and you typically rate the grain as 2 row 40, 4 row 40, chocolate, caramel, dark roast. And really that's what they do. If it's a caramel roasted grain, they've actually added caramel to it.
Okay.
If it's a dark roast, they've actually charred it. They've burnt it.
So when someone had said, it's caramel roasted, I always assumed the caramel was the color, not the flavor, that
No,
they had a
actually-
light burning to get the color.
No, they actually add caramel to it.
Really? Well, I
It's
like
got good
caramel.
caramel flavor. But and you blend the different kinds of grains and the amount of grain that you use, the amount of dark grain, light grain, rice grain, and you come up with a recipe that works. I had a very small, what I call an experimental still, which brewed 5 gallons, or 7 gallons roughly. We got 5 gallons of beer out of it. And then try to take that from 5 gallons to 20 barrels, not fun, because the ratios change.
Right.
And so there's an experimental, you have to go through multiple iterations till you get it right. And the different kinds of yeasts and the different kinds of hops. And we played around with it. I played around
You
with it
can't
for-
just multiply across.
No.
Well,
doesn't work.
I can tell you from experience, like in Severn, you probably know this too. Like, you may have a recipe that you've cooked at home a million times, but you try to make that at the firehouse
For 20 people.
It doesn't come out the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
The ratios are
it's
different.
Yeah, you have to experiment with it. And we actually switched. We did that, and then we also did something called an export ale, which is a red ale like Killian's, for example.
Okay.
Killian's is delicious, by the way.
Yeah, but it's an export ale. It's a red ale. It's easy to make.
So, Bill, what's your favorite beer? Like, what is Bill Besser drinking these days? Like, what's his everyday go-to? Like, I know Thomas has an everyday carry. What's an everyday beer for you, Bill Besser?
Either a Smith's ale,
Smithwick's.
which
Very
is amber ale. It's a typical Irish ale.
That's your go-to?
Or Guinness. I'm a Guinness guy.
I like
I've been a
Guinness,
Guinness
too.
guy since
think-
I was.
we were talking about this on our last podcast with me and Tony. There are places that have really good Guinness, and there are places that have
Bad Guinness.
that
Yeah.
Probably
what's-
the places with the
what's
bad
what's
Guinness don't
distinction?
sell.
What's making that distinction between the good Guinness and bad? Because I see that they're still pouring it from a tap, but for whatever reason, one is shitty and the other was so delicious.
Okay, so
Lines.
I really think Guinness is Guinness, and Guinness is brewed one way. A lot of places will substitute carbon dioxide for the nitrogen
Really?
That's probably it.
That's gotta be
that.
it.
That it
because
alone.
nitrogen's more expensive.
Okay.
They have to have nitrogen in order to sell Guinness.
Now, is there any way we can tell the difference when we go into these places?
You
or
can
we
look
just
at
say,
no, you can look at the head.
okay.
If you look
More
at the
head is the.
no. If the head is finer, it's nitrogen. If it's grainier, it's
When you say finer and grain, you're talking about the size of the bubble.
size of the bubble.
You should be able to float a bottle cap on it, right? Yeah. I'm doing that.
And
next
also
time.
the bartender. I've watched Tony. I mean, I've been going to Harrigan's for 4 years. He pours a good Guinness. Teaching somebody how to pour Guinness is not easy because they rush it, and when they rush it, it doesn't.
Right.
You don't have that flavor that develops.
Now, when I was bartending, I was able to put the clover on top. You do that?
I know. I'm sure you could draw a few other things on there. I've heard. So I've heard.
I actually have. But
Throw a phone number on top.
no, because
Something
you only
else on top.
have a certain amount. Because
No, I know
when
you
you
only
start
have
putting
a-
the clover
yeah,
on there,
yeah.
you only
Well,
have.
Guinness now is actually burning your picture in it. They actually burn your picture into the foam
Get out of
using
here.
a laser.
Really,
Yeah.
man.
Now,
It's been a long time since I bartended.
Now, I always got to tell a hometown story, and this is again a Cleveland story. Sorry, Chicago, but it's a bar,
We'll
it's a
edit
chain of
we'll
bars.
edit this out.
Well, yeah, just get rid of this part. Just don't even think I said that.
Cut it out.
But there's a chain of bars called Wink and Lizard, and at those bars they specialize in making different, like black and tan, but they make it with different. So they have like a blue and tan. So they use Guinness and
Labatt.
yeah, Labatt.
That's got to be that's got to make your skin crawl, right? Like as a brewer, like mixing the black with that. Does that irk you?
I like beer, so I don't drink black and tans. I really like the taste of beer. I like tasting the beer as the brewer decided he liked it. In Western Michigan, because of the infusion and the explosion of breweries, 10,000 breweries, they all do IPAs. Easy to do an IPA. I could do it in my bathtub. Doesn't make it a good IPA.
I know. Is it over? Is the IPA thing over?
The
yet?
IPA is officially dead. Thank God.
It is dead.
Yes.
It is. I thought it was still going.
It's dead. It's gone.
Been like
Gone.
15 years.
Oh my goodness.
Everybody likes a session beer. I want to be able to go in a brewery and drink from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 2 o'clock in the morning when they close. I can't do that if I drink IPA.
If you
No,
drink
2 or
IPA.
3 and you're done.
You're done.
It's
it's just
very bitter.
ridiculous.
Well, Severin, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Like,
Oh
so,
no,
so,
it's fine.
so you were mixing up these beers that have no business being together.
Yes, and
All
I
right.
just wanted to know, was that a thing anywhere else? Because they had like Christmas is around Christmas time. A lot of Christmas sales are out, so they have a Black Christmas. They have
I go into a bar and the first thing they're doing is taking a really good aged whiskey and then smoking it. And I'm going, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm smoking the whiskey. Why? Well, because it makes smoked whiskey. And I said, well, the distiller who brewed that or distilled it actually liked the flavor of the whiskey as it is. So what are you adding to it? And of course, the people who own the bar gets very offended by that. It's the same thing with beers. They'll smoke a beer. Why? If you're going to smoke the grain, right? Don't smoke the beer.
smoke it before it gets there.
Right. And I do know a guy who does a smoked porter, and he does a very good job of it because he smokes the grain. So you actually get that smoke. You get that smoky flavor into the taste. But it's like, why change that? I like cocktails. I understand cocktails and cocktailologists and
Coctologist, yes.
what they have.
I have no comment.
Yes.
If
That's
you
a
could
whole
see my
different
face.
podcast.
But I understand the need to be creative, and I like creativity. But if I'm going to drink whiskey, I like to taste the whiskey. Pour it over a glass of, a solid ice cube, and I can sit.
Well,
all night long.
we found out what's your everyday beer. What about your everyday whiskey? What's your back, as they say in the
Templeton
bar
Rye.
industry? What is it?
Templeton Rye. I like rye whiskey.
There's a Prohibition bottle of Templeton Rye that is in my top 5.
Yeah, that's a 6-year-old. Yeah.
Okay, so since we're on that topic, explain what makes something a rye.
They use rye grain.
So
instead
it's
of
grain
barley.
instead of...
It's just pure rye grain instead of barley. Rye doesn't produce as much sugar, so you need to use more of it to get the alcohol content up, and they use a different yeast.
Yeah, I just, within the last couple of years, started to come around to the ryes because, and it was that Templeton Prohibition series.
Yeah, Templeton Mickelson's, which is actually from Kentucky, is real good. It's a small batch. I don't like the small batches. I try to stay away from
You don't like small batches anything?
Huh?
You don't like small batches?
I love small batches anything.
Okay.
I kind of stay away from the Jack Daniels and the Jim Beams because it's mass produced.
Right.
Well, people, I tell people, when I started bartending, I started getting into scotches and whiskeys. And when I first started going down that road, old salty bartender that, trained me how to be a bartender said, there's no going back. I could never sit down and drink what we're drinking. I couldn't have a glass of Jack Daniels right now. And the same thing that I can't drink Johnny Walker, whether it's the blue, the black label, the most expensive. I can't drink Johnny Walker. It just it's not appealing to me, and I don't know if I've just become a real snob.
You're a
with
snob.
my-
That's what I was. We
But
were all
I-
thinking.
I-
Words out of my mouth, right? We were all
I
thinking.
can't.
No, I think
don't,
as
I
you
don't
grow
like
older, your
blended
palate gets
whiskeys
better.
either.
No, I think your palate gets better because you're not binge drinking. You're not going out with a bunch of guys and just throwing bourbons
throwing
down.
them back.
I
right.
like how certain whiskeys taste, and you know what I've really gotten into now, and I want your opinion on it. But I have really become a huge fan of Japanese whiskeys.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what, like, they kind of came out of nowhere, right? With this Japanese
They didn't really
whiskey?
come out of nowhere. They've been doing it for a lot of years. In fact, if you talk to like Woodford or Barton's, which is a small batch, they ship 75% of their product to Japan.
75%?
Yes, because the money is there.
Oh.
They'll pay anything.
Yeah.
When
That's what I've heard.
God bless capitalism.
when Woodford Reserve came out with their double oaked, and the double oaked is 4 years in a charred barrel and 2 years in a raw oak barrel. It's super smooth. You can sit there and drink it like water all night long. There's no aftertaste, no bitterness, everything else. They did a release party in, let me think here. So 2010, they did it in April 2010. And because it's in Kentucky, they did it at a dinner train, and it's a 5-star. It's actually a 5-star restaurant. You go in, you sit down. They take you out on an old Pullman dining car with the white linen and the china and everything else, and you actually go past all the Jim Beam distilleries as you go out. It's in Bardstown, Kentucky, and Woodford actually did the release party. So they introduced the liquor and they gave everyone 2 drinks. And fortunately, the woman who I was with, my date, didn't drink, so I got all her drinks.
So she didn't last very long then, did she?
Yeah, and then I got a free bottle of it.
Yeah, let's move on.
Anyway, but it was a really nice time. But I was talking to the sales guy, and he said, "You can't buy it because we ship everything overseas. It just was impossible."
Well, what I notice about, and maybe you can speak to this, when I drink the Japanese whiskeys, when I drink like Irish whiskeys or scotches, I don't know how to describe it. It's more complicated flavor. There's more going on. When you take a sip of it, you can taste like different things in there. When I drink the Japanese whiskeys, it's very straightforward. There's not much of that bite, that aftertaste. There's not. Once it's gone, it's gone. And is it because of the way it's made, or the ingredients?
It's the ingredients.
Is
It's
it?
the
The
grain.
ingredients?
It's the grain.
Because you know how like you talked about earlier that let this go and it's going to pass
Front
the
of your
front of your
tongue to
tongue,
the
then it's
back,
going to go to
yeah.
the back, and you're going to hit. There's not really that much of that going on with the Japanese whiskeys.
No, and the Japanese learns very quickly, and their beers are excellent, by the way. I don't know if you drank
Yes.
Asahi or
Oh,
Kira.
Yes, their beers are
Right.
excellent.
A lot of their beers in Japan, they don't have grain over there, so they have to import grain. There's just not enough land. I mean, they have rice, but they use rice a lot. So a lot of their beers actually have rice in it, and that's the cream finish. They
I
don't
was
call
about
it
to say,
cream
so there
finish,
should be
but it has a
cream.
cream.
Cream ales. Learn something.
We did. We
Got
all
to use
learned
it.
about the cream today.
Yeah. But it's really what they
Their
do.
beer is more pilsners, aren't they?
Their beers are more pilsners.
Yeah, they're I think they're the largest consumer of Carlsberg in Asia.
Really? No
Yeah.
kidding.
But a Pilsner, so to brew an IPA is 1.5 days in a fermenter. To brew a Pilsner is 90 to 120 days in a
Wow.
fermenter. And you have to keep the temperature at 45 degrees. So use a different yeast.
So
the
it's a
yeast is
longer
slower.
process to make a pilsner than an IPA.
Yes.
And the
The yeast
IPA
is
costs a
different.
lot more than the
I
Pilsner.
thought it'd be
Right.
the opposite.
Because of the yeast. The yeast has to be a slower yeast.
marketing.
An IPA, you use 60 degrees, and a Pilsner, you can't go above 45. You go to 50 degrees, the yeast dies. So it's a much longer process. It's a much longer commitment. You're tying up a fermenter for 4 months.
Same
Hops,
ingredients.
same hops, different hops. So you're going to use preservation hops, so you're going to use different flavoring hops.
Let me ask you a question about Vince and I were not arguing, but we were discussing last
We
week.
never argue, Thomas.
No, well, we weren't arguing, but he was basically saying, take this garbage and go. We were talking about I saw his bottle of Screwball whiskey, and Screwball whiskey is it tastes like, just take a spoonful of peanut butter, shove it in your mouth, and that's what the whiskey tastes like. And he said, and I agree with him to a point. He said, well, I just on principle alone, I can't drink it because, you bastardized the whiskey. And I said, but it tastes like peanut butter. So I'm really interested in what your opinion is, because for me, I love it. I know, yes, it's whiskey and they put sugar and all this other flavoring in, but it tastes like peanut butter.
Okay, so whiskey for a long time has not been favored with women. They'll either go with the rums or they'll go with
Vodka.
Or something clear. Whiskey has made a huge comeback in the United States, primarily for a couple of reasons. One, just the lowest calories. It's the lowest sugar of any liquor out there, including vodka, rum. Rum is all sugar.
It's good for your health. People drink up.
Right. And there some manufacturers have gotten, how do I want to put it, cutesy with it, because you're dealing with people who like cutesy things.
Well, it's also basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to take over the Fireball spot.
Sure.
That's what they're doing.
The Fireball is cinnamon, and I can't do that.
But that's exactly, it's just,
It's the same. It's the same idea.
Basically, it doesn't have to necessarily be whiskey. It's just, it tastes good. It's got alcohol in it. It's got the party started.
So, yeah.
You're just fighting for
I
a
look
certain,
around
certain
here.
market,
I don't.
right?
I would say guess most of your ages are in the 30s and 40s.
I'm in my 20s. That's a lie.
Okay. I know I'm the oldest person here. You don't.
Are you
qualify.
over 52?
But the young generation today has no brand loyalty. Tomorrow they'll drink a Claw, whatever that stuff is, that nasty
White
seltzer
Claw.
water.
No
We're
law
talking
with the
about putting
claw.
a pre-party.
Yeah, they'll drink that, and then the next day they'll drink Irish whiskey or an Irish coffee because they saw it at the bar and it looked good.
They followed the trend.
It's whatever the trend is, and it's just X today, Y tomorrow, and everybody in that generation wants instant gratification. It's not about working for something. It's I want it now. The other generations have been brand loyal. I drink one kind of whiskey. I like it. I stick with it because I know what the taste is going to be. I know it's going to be consistent. That's changed in the industry, in the bar industry especially. And I think that's now, the pendulum is going the other way. Even at Harrigan's, you notice some people coming in, they drink the same thing every time.
So you think that people have experimented so much following the trends that they actually like, I really like this and I really like that, and I'm just going to stick with it.
Yeah. Because they get tired. I mean, it's...
Sure.
I'm sorry, peanut butter just doesn't do much for
Plus,
me.
if you
love
do
it. I
15
love
of
it.
those shots, how is your body going to feel the next day?
Oh, I feel like crap the next day, but the night I'm drinking it, I absolutely love it.
While you're on the ride, you're having fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Till the ride stops, and then it's like,
Then it's spinning.
So are we up for bottle number 3?
By the way, I want to just mention before we get to bottle number 3, that Slane was very smooth.
That was
very smooth.
I didn't get a chance to all the way describe it. I said the other one felt like a handshake. This one felt more like a arm around your shoulder. There you go. If only you guys could see.
So
But yeah, that's
I
what
will
it
tell you
felt
that,
like.
and Tony can vouch for this because he's been part of a number of contests with Slane. We've done a couple experiments here just recently for Irish coffees. It is a perfect blend of whiskey that you can do multiple things with because of its sherry. And I will tell you that
this
Irish
what you make
coffees
your
are
Irish
great,
coffees
but
with?
if you take dark chocolate and throw a shot of Slane in it, the chocolate and the sherry notes just highlight each
When
other.
you say
put the
chocolate, you mean like a
chocolate in your-
chocolate liqueur? Or
No,
like a
chocolate,
hot
hot
chocolate.
chocolate.
Oh, like hot
hot
chocolate.
chocolate.
Heart
Get
doc-
some marshmallows in there.
Get out, for real?
Is that how
Oh,
you put
no,
your kids
yeah.
to sleep?
No,
That's like put
I
some
don't,
sound
know,
to
I don't know where the kids are.
I have a female friend who comes over to the house. She doesn't like coffee.
You know women that don't like booze, and you know women that don't like coffee. That's suspect.
Yeah.
He knows a lot of women. That's what I take that as.
Hey,
Those are just two.
I stand corrected. I'm very sorry.
But I did take a hot chocolate. I have this Godiva the Godiva cocoa. It's a dark chocolate. It goes in a Keurig. You pop the Keurig cup in. You throw a shot of Slane in it, or an ounce of Slane, and the sherry and the chocolate just blend. And she was sitting there going, "Oh my God, this is great." And about 6 later, she was going like, "How many of these have I had?" And I said, "You don't want to know."
And that's when you did your other thing. You separated her from another.
Well, see, there's a
Lee
perfect
just got
example
very
how
red.
you wouldn't think, like, you know, like what Tom was saying was the peanut butter and the whiskey. You wouldn't think about that, but if the cocoa and the sherry and the slain manage to get together and are delicious, then I guess there really are no rules.
There are no rules.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
I mean, if Severin's mixing Labatt and Guinness together, then there are no rules.
calling it a black and orange.
Is that what it's called?
I don't remember, honestly, but it's just whatever summer shandy, blacks. Everything is black just in front. Black summer, black shandy.
When it starts with Guinness,
So
right?
When it starts with the
Okay.
Guinness, yeah.
So, as a master brewer and working in multiple breweries, I absolutely refuse to do a fruit beer. Sorry, I don't do wheat beers either. 'cause
Don't
I like wheat
apologize.
beers.
They're horrible.
The owner of the brewery has this recipe. It's for something called it's a strawberry ale. He does it for the women in the summer. I got stuck with brewing it because I was the assistant brewer. Have you ever tried grinding 400 pounds of frozen strawberries and try to get them into a fermenter?
Do I have to answer that question?
No. 12 hours later, I've had enough of this. We brewed 20 barrels of it. The guys that drank it was actually all the guys that drank it. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Well, I
couldn't
mean,
taste
did
the
it wind up
strawberry
being
and it was
delicious?
light. But anyway, so I don't do fruit beers. I absolutely refuse to do it.
Now I have a quick question. You went to Germany to be the master brewer. I thought Germany was like the land of the wheat beers and like the
Weissens.
and so you didn't catch a taste for those over there.
I had to brew them in order to be a master brewer. I had to learn about them. I don't like wheat.
Okay.
The reason is simply this. Number one, when you do a wheat beer, you leave the grain in the beer. You don't filter it. So if you drink a traditional wheat beer, it's like sucking on the end of a pine cone. Okay.
Well, that's why it has.
It's high fiber.
That's why
I
you
mean,
can't
you literally
see
get your
through
fiber
it,
at the same
and
time.
it's thick, right? Or like it seems like it's unfiltered.
It is
you
unfiltered.
can't- you
You're
can't-
getting the raw
There's no
grain.
clarity to it.
There's
right?
no clarity to the beer. I hate that. I like filtered beer. I mean, that's the whole reason I look at a beer and you look at the quality and you put it up to the light and you can
See through it. and
It's that
you see golden. You see gold when you look through it. The right beer.
delight. So to me, that's the beers I like. So I did learn how to make them, but I just don't do them.
Okay.
But I also learned the Dortmunder style, which is the darker beers, which are the Pilsners, the dark Pilsners. And they also drink, they drink ales. They actually make ales over there as well. But what I did learn is I learned about the process of brewing and what hops do, how you do flavoring hops and what you do, what kind of yeasts, and the different kinds of yeasts. So for an IPA, you use typically Challenger yeast. Or when you do a Pilsner, you use a different kind of yeast and a different kind of hops. So that's what you learn, and then you learn to experiment.
Well, did you learn about the history of the IPA, how the British would put these on the ships, and, like for them to drink on their journeys? Like,
Yeah, and that's called preservation hops, and the more you put in, the longer the beer lasts.
and that's how IPAs, it became an Indian Pale Ale, because the British troops would take these on the boats on their way to India, right?
But the same thing with an export ale. So Killian's is actually an export ale. They call it an export ale. It has a high hop content. It has a bitterness unit of about, it's called IBUs, about 135. But it's a red ale. And it'll last forever because it's got a high hop count to it.
So that's why it's got that hoppiness, just
It's a
because
hoppy
it's meant
taste.
for travel.
It's meant for travel.
Meant for
Okay.
travel. I like
Well,
that.
I went to when I was in my 20s. I went to Amsterdam, and
What were you doing there?
that's none of your business. That's none of your business.
It's legal now. It's okay.
He's
Well,
He's
but-
going to the museum.
But one of the things that really blew me out of the water was I went to I drank Heineken and I drank Amstel, which here, doesn't really appeal to me. But over there, it was the most delicious beer. And a bartender there was explaining to me that they have different purity laws there in Amsterdam than we do here in America. So when we, he was basically saying we bastardize their beer to conform to our laws here, and it changes the entire profile of that beer. But it was so delicious and it was flavorful, and they serve it in little glasses. You don't get a big 12-ounce glass of beer.
Have you ever had Orange City beer?
Orange City?
Iron City. It's from Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Oh,
You know
that's
what
Fifth
makes
City.
it?
Okay.
No.
It's the lead content in the water is so high. That's what makes the beer.
I have had Iron City.
So you'll go blind drinking it, but you'll enjoy doing it.
Right. You'll be the happiest blind guy on the block.
Schmidt's beer, same thing in Pennsylvania. Any of the local breweries, they use local. The one that's now going national, I can't.
Yuengling?
Yuengling.
Yuengling, yeah.
Yuengling is the same thing. They get the water out of the Reading River. It's whatever's in the Reading River that makes the beer. If they tried to take it and move it somewhere else, it wouldn't work.
And it's not everywhere. You got to go to the right place. Well, that's the same thing with Wisconsin. What's the Wisconsin beer?
Rhinelander.
No,
Line
it's
and Kugel.
not.
Not Line and Kugel. The other one.
I've got a case of it in my fridge. The one that they only sell in
Oh,
Wisconsin.
you're talking about the New Glarus stuff?
New Glarus.
Like
New Glarus.
Spotted Cow?
Yeah, Spotted Cow.
I've
That
got a
stuff
case in
is
my
delicious.
fridge.
Yeah.
It is.
New Glarus is a microbrewery. They do very well. The reason they don't sell anywhere else, they don't want to.
Volume.
Well,
They
don't
don't
forget,
have
remember
to.
when Fat Tire wasn't sold on this side of Mississippi River? They said we're
So
not going to
one
do
of
it.
the best breweries in Michigan is a thing called Bastogne. You won't, because he doesn't bottle it. He doesn't go to competitions. It's Belgian beer. It's one of the best Belgian breweries in the country. He's a chef. He owns a restaurant in what's the hell the name? Oak Park, outside Detroit. It's a suburb. He owns a restaurant. He pairs his beer with his food. It is the best Belgian beer I've ever had.
Road trip.
I've had people from Belgium come over and drink there, and it's going, oh my God, I'm at home. And he's arrogant. He's just, I refuse. He doesn't want to play by the rules. He doesn't play by anybody's rules. He doesn't compete, but he has the best beer.
Sounds like my podcast.
You don't strike me as too arrogant.
No, not the arrogant.
But
It's
he's,
just
but he
don't
just,
play by the rules
but he
part.
just doesn't want to play with the brewers. And he just says, "Hey, I brew beer because I enjoy it. I'm from Belgium," and he does. He has a very traditional the triple the triple beer. It's just it's to die for. Just refuses to go anywhere with it. He sells it out of his brewery. You can buy bottles of it there, but that's about it. Or
Really?
jugs, growlers.
Growlers. Let's who hasn't spoken too much so far on this podcast is you, Tony.
Tony, yeah.
What's been going on, man? What's been going
Not
on
much.
since,
The
our
bars are
last
still
podcast?
closed. We're getting ready to open up, hopefully around April.
Yeah.
It's going to be a party. The Roaring 20s are almost here. I can see
is
it
that
now.
what you guys think it's going to be like, the Roaring 20s?
Yes.
When
Oh
we-
yeah, anybody under 30, they don't. Basically, when I moved here first, I was always like, "Oh, it's a snowstorm. Oh, should we go out?" And all my friends are like 22, 23, like, "Yeah, don't worry about that. Let's go." So basically, it's like that. Except it's like a big snowstorm.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it.
I got to tell you, many of the bars around me have stayed open, have not closed.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard some of the places have stayed open.
I'll give you addresses after the show.
Look at Steve just stirring the pot over there. All right. Well, let's move in. You want to move into number 3? Or
Yeah, Harrigan's is closed, and it used to be my favorite bar.
Yeah.
It's only 4 blocks from my house. So I have found one other place that we go drink. It's not really a bar, but it's a restaurant. And we sit outside.
An Irishman
in
in
a
a
bubble?
restaurant. There's something
something
really
wrong with
wrong
this.
with society.
Can I ask
know?
you a serious question, though? How
Yes, sir.
has the closure really seriously affected you?
It's just it's been a humbling experience, and
It's hard to have no income for 9 months.
a lot of my bartender guys, they kind of weren't worried about it initially. They were like, "Oh, it'll be fine." They're like smoking weed and drinking every day, and now they're like running out of money, and they're like, "Oh, I probably should have done something else."
Yeah.
Because I'm currently working in the exciting world of retail, minimum wage retail right now.
sure.
Doing that. I'm doing a little deliveries. It's there's work out there. It's not the most glamorous.
Hold on one second. Pour on the mic. Pour on the mic. Let them hear. There we go.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, so you're coping, but this is not what you want to do. You're just getting by.
Not so much, but it's all right. You know what? The great thing is that the millennials don't want to work, so there's always going to be all the minimum wage jobs are always going to be available.
Yep, that's not a lie.
I'm better than this. I don't need to work here. You know. Tell them.
So what are we drinking
so
now?
this is
run us through this one.
This is a pot still, but it has been aged for 12 years in barrels.
Which is an exorbitant amount of time for.
It
this,
is.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Should I say the youngest whiskey in the blend is 12 years?
Okay, so we could have something that's like a 20-year in there, but it's the minimum is 12 years, which is pretty ridiculous.
Pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
For beer.
All right.
I mean for whiskey.
So
However,
so don't tell us anything about it. Let's take a smell, and you guys tell me what you think we got going on.
Now, for me, this is the first Irish whiskey I was introduced to. I had Redbreast before. Redbreast is one of my favorites. I shouldn't say it is my absolute favorite, but it's one of my favorites. And I was introduced to this by a very good fireman buddy that I have, and he said, "Oh, get this Redbreast. It's better than any of that other crap you've been drinking any time in your life." And he was not lying. So every time I go somewhere and I see this is the first thing I order as I go to the Redbreast.
Well, what I noticed right away is that it smells stronger than the Slane. It's got more like alcohol-y smell than the Slane. What makes that? What gives it that aroma?
you're taking the impurities out of the alcohol, but you're just allowing the alcohol to come out.
So this is just all alcohol. I'm so.
Yes.
All right. So, all right.
The longer you age alcohol, the higher the content of the alcohol comes
You would
out.
think that it would be the opposite, right? Because doesn't alcohol
'Cause the water
evaporate
evaporates.
fast?
The water gets absorbed. The water evaporates. The alcohol becomes stronger. So to take, for example, bourbon, it's a 100-year-old bourbon. You're going from 80 proof to over 100 proof.
All right. Well, let's give this a whack.
So I know you said the Slane was your favorite, and I was a little prejudiced, but the Redbreast is my favorite because
Still your
I just
favorite.
like it. Yeah,
Slane is smoother, but this has more character. I
think it's more traditional, what you would expect of
In
a
a whiskey. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But this is pure whiskey.
I mean, it's good. Absolutely.
This is pure whiskey in charcoal aged barrels.
This is
That's
for
it.
more when you want to taste the whiskey more. This gives you
but
more
they do
whiskey
have
flavor.
they do also use sherry for the Redbreast. Yes.
Yeah, well, that I was about to say, you can still,
get
smell that sweetness.
That's
in here.
sweet.
Yeah, and you can't see because obviously no camera, but I actually opened the Slane and I was smelling the two back and forth, and definitely the Slane smells a slight bit sweeter. This smells much better than the what is it?
Teeling?
Teeling. It smells much better than the Teeling. I've been calling it bathtub all night, but it wasn't bad. I don't want to.
So-
No, I liked it.
Yeah.
In regards of
enjoyed it.
price wise, how does this compare to Slane or Teeling? The Redbreast is 80? Really?
The longer
Slane
something
it
is
is.
aged,
This guy he knows. Ask him.
the longer something is aged, the higher the cost. Because the longer the distiller cannot make money.
Well, real estate costs money. You got the big warehouses full of barrels where real estate costs money.
You know, when you talk about starting a distillery, and I actually did this because I own a distillery. It's called Stone Creek. The initial cost is you make a product, and for a minimum of 4 years, you can't sell it.
Got to keep it somewhere.
It's just stored. It's in a warehouse, aged. So literally, you start a business, you're going to spend, if you do a good job of it, about $1 million in equipment.
Up front before you even start making product, you're $1 million.
You're $1 million
investment.
into it.
And you're talking just equipment and buildings
Facilities,
and right.
$1 million.
That sounds like Fire and Iron Media Company. I mean, just these parallels are just
So but
mind blowing.
for 4 years, you're just actually putting money in. You don't get any money out. Minimum 4 years. If you're going to do a really good product, 6 to 8.
And you want to, I would assume, you're going to keep producing product for those 4 years
Yes.
while your first batch is sitting there waiting to be sold.
Yeah, so that means more barrels and more storage, more
And
barrels,
more
and
money
storage,
on
and more-
equipment, maintenance, and more money on
So it's got to be,
ingredients.
if you start a distillery, it's got to be 10 years before you're really turning a profit.
It is. So you're looking at a 10 million. You're looking at a 10-year investment before you see any return at all.
And
He
then
said
you
10
make
million. I think he dropped the ball.
drop the butt right.
Well,
Then you make so much that you start throwing away sherry after a while too.
Yeah,
So,
right. I don't feel
If you
sorry.
use sherry,
If you use sherry,
if you use sherry.
well, if you guys don't mind, I want to. This is we haven't done this on any podcast, and I want to do it since we're all here together. But I kind of wanted to put Bill on the microphone and
Yes,
kind of get
Bill.
a little background on Bill because
While
Bill
we're
has
here,
been the
why not?
guy behind the scenes. Every podcast that you hear, Bill's edited and put his 2 cents, and we really couldn't be here without him. So, Bill, number one, what do you think? Come over here. As a sound engineer, you should know you need to talk. to
Yeah,
the
you got to talk to the mic, Bill. Come on. The whole
tell-
show he's been
so,
holding the mics
first
for us.
of all, give us a little background because people always want to know about Bill, the guy behind the scenes.
Just a short answer, Bill. And
Where are you from, Bill?
I'm from Mongolia. Moved here in the United States like it's been almost 3 years, and for Chicago it's been a year and a half. And I'm a sound engineer. Yeah, shortly.
Like, what kind of music do you do?
For music here, mostly the Chicago rappers come at the studio for the recording sessions. Yeah, rapper. What?
The drill music scene? These younger guys?
Yeah, younger guys. Mostly, I guess they're from the south side, and for me, I do a DJing too, and
And you also have a podcast,
yeah.
but it's only in Mongolian, right?
Yeah, and next year on January we're starting a English podcast, and I'm proudly saying that our very first guest is Vince.
Oh,
So yeah,
suck up.
I'm really excited for
I
that.
am excited too.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of? What do you think of whiskey? Do you drink whiskey in Mongolia? What's the liquor scene in Mongolia? Do you guys drink whiskeys and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a good question because I would say in Mongolia drinking is a very popular scene, and firstly, most of them are drinking straightly the vodka, but like I would say maybe last 20 years or something, maybe 10 years, the whiskey is getting more popular in the young people. They like to drink whiskey more than the vodka now. But me too, because vodka sounds hard, right?
So in Mongolia, do they grow grain? I know they grow wheat.
Yeah, they grow the wheat.
The wheat.
Yeah, but we don't have any Mongolian original whiskey or something, but we do have the vodka. Yeah.
There's Mongolian vodka.
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
What's the name of that?
Oh, there are like numbers of vodkas, but more like if we talk about the more traditional one, it comes from the horse milk.
Horse milk?
Yeah.
I didn't know you could milk
I
a
thought
horse.
vodka was from potatoes, to be honest.
Did
with
you know you could, Steve? Did you know
Vodka
you could
can be
milk a
made
horse?
from any grain.
hold on. It's like meet the parents. It's like
Vodka
anything
can-
with nipples. You just get under there and you just start going to work.
Well, Bill, I
Vodka
just
can be
want to
made from
thank
any
you for
grain,
being
including
here.
grape leaves.
Thank you for
Grape leaf.
doing all
Oh.
that work for us.
And yes, Bill, thank you for all your hard work with all the podcasts. We do all appreciate it very much.
Absolutely.
All right, Bill, where were we?
We were talking about grape leaves. You said
Grape
yeah,
leaves.
hold on. Let's go back to that. So you can make vodka from just about anything. So tell me the difference between, because it's all just fermentation and then distillation. So what's the difference between vodka and whiskey?
The grain that you use.
So you're not using a grain with vodka. You're using a fruit.
Well, you
or
can use
something.
a grain. You can
Well,
use
there's
potato.
potato,
You can
right,
use
potato.
wheat. In fact, it depends on where you go. Russian vodka is typically wheat.
It's Sriracha's grape vodka, right?
Yeah, Sriracha's grape vodka. Tito's potato.
Tito is very good, by the way.
Tito's made from potatoes. A lot of a lot of Russian vodkas is made from potatoes.
Right.
Any
I always thought it was potato until this day.
any vegetable because it's starch.
Is
and
that
it's
is that
sugar.
the what you're trying to get is the starch?
Yeah, if
to
the
make
starch
vodka?
turns into sugar, it
Starch-based.
turn into alcohol.
So it's a starch-based vegetable will make
sugar
vodka.
will make sugar.
Right.
And you add the yeast and it converts to alcohol.
They do their magic funky, thing, and you get have a good night
You
a
could
few
do
months later.
rice vodka. Would it be?
Typically, when you do rice, you can make whiskey with rice only. In fact, the
Well,
Japanese
is that
do
what
it.
you
It's
make?
called
Is that
sake.
what sake, right?
Yeah,
Sake. That's
So sake, so rice becomes whiskey, not vodka.
That's correct.
You're dealing with a
But
bunch
whiskey
of
and
newbies here. So, I mean,
whiskey and
We're
vodka
like
is the same
children.
thing.
Like,
Yeah, right.
tell us more, Bill.
alcohol.
It's alcohol. It's whatever you want to label it.
Right. Okay.
Because
you
the,
said
the
whiskey.
Koreans have soju. That's like a rice wine.
That's
Soju
a
will
rice
mess
wine,
you
yeah.
up.
I'm not familiar with soju.
I think we need to order all of the above. Do it part
Well,
two.
Travel the world.
You know,
Yes.
Bill, since we're like just bombarding you with questions, this may not even be in your wheelhouse, but are you familiar with absinthe and
Yes.
like the history of that? Can you impart some knowledge on that? Like it was a hypnotic or hallucinogen, right?
It is. Still
And it
is to this
but
day.
you
Is
can-
a hallucinogen.
I remember
We talked
we
about this
couldn't
on
get
my
it here. You
podcast.
had to import it, or you had to find somebody who could travel to outside of the United States and bring it in. But I think now it's more readily available, right?
Um,
And what about it gives it the hallucinogenic effect?
well, first, it's a worm.
it's
and
a
it's
worm.
worm-eaten wood.
Get out of here!
Wormwood.
It's wormwood. It's actually got its worms. The traditional absinthe, you'll find a worm in the bottom.
Get out of here!
It is a hallucinogen because it's made from, it's like mushrooms. You know,
Yeah, it's a root.
It's
the
a root.
It's popular in Switzerland and France, right?
But you pour it over a sugar cube
because it tastes
right?
god awful. I don't. Not that I know.
Oh, because of the taste. That's why you do
yeah,
it
that's
over
why
the
you pour it
sugar.
over sugar.
Oh,
absinthe tastes like licorice.
It tastes
to be
like
honest.
licorice,
Yeah, it
yeah.
does.
I
And it's
hate
green.
licorice. God, I hate licorice.
So you like peanut butter?
I hate licorice.
Get rid of that licorice.
No, licorice is the devil.
I've seen it. I've actually had it when I was in France. I lived in France for about a year.
Well, I had it on my trip to Amsterdam, and I didn't feel any effect whatsoever.
You got robbed.
They
didn't tell you the
sold some
effect.
Ecto Green
Yeah,
Kool-Aid.
I
May have been other elements involved.
Right. It was competing with other things, I think. But
If you drink enough of absinthe, it will drive you mad. Yeah, it's like PCP. It's like the mushrooms.
Is that why Vincent Van Gogh cut his ear off?
No, actually, he had.
Bill was there. He knows.
No, if you go back and you read the story from him, he actually was suffering from tinnitus
Just
oh,
the
really?
ringing.
Ear ringing,
and the ringing in his ears.
ear.
Like even when he writes in his journals, he talks about that.
Man, just when we thought you only knew about.
I told you he was an encyclopedia.
He's an encyclopedia.
Encyclopedia.
All right, let's play this game. Let's play Stump Bill.
Stuff Bill.
Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background on myself.
astrophysics. Tell me a little bit about.
No, actually, I am a design engineer. I work in the electronics industry. I've been doing it for 30-some years. I've designed the compute system for the 787. I've designed medical equipment, CT scans, washing machines. I've worked in every industry.
You just make booze for fun.
I do it for fun.
So the booze is a passion project for you.
It is. I became a chef because I wanted to learn how to cook, but never worked in an industry. I could kill the staff within the first week. But I just enjoy learning and doing stuff. I'm an old timer. I'm an old vet.
Yeah, tell us about your military career. You're a former Marine, correct?
I'm a former Marine. I spent 6 years in Uncle Sam's moldy crotch. Sorry.
Only you could say that.
I was a helicopter pilot. I served 21 months in Vietnam. Yeah,
Thank you for
I'm
your
an old guy.
service.
So I'm actually 70 years old.
No kidding.
Yeah.
God damn.
He said he's 70. I think he's a
You,
liar.
you should be
No,
the
I'm 70. I
poster
was born in
child for
1950.
whiskey, Bill.
Huh?
You should be the poster child for whiskey. Be
Yeah,
like,
most interesting man alive here. I vote right now. We need to start a petition.
right. Get
We're
rid of
gonna
that.
put
Get
Bill
rid of
with
that guy from that other company.
Bill is the most
this is your
interesting
guy.
man alive. I don't always drink whiskey, but when I do, sometimes it's with the most interesting man alive.
Bill Besser.
I've always had the ability in my life to go do whatever I wanted to go do.
Yeah.
And my dad was a 35-year career Army officer, served in the U.S. Army. He actually taught at the Citadel. He taught history and Russian and German.
Were you a warrant officer then if you were a helicopter pilot?
I got drafted. I went to work for a two-star general because I was a squared away Marine and I was a corporal after 6 months in the Marine Corps. I went to military school, so I knew all about military. I knew how to delegate. I knew how to accept responsibility. In fact, my drill instructor beat me up for it because I wasn't supposed to figure it out that early in my career. I went to work for a one-star admiral in electronics because I had got drafted out of college and I wanted to go back in electronics. And he said, well, you can fly airplanes. Why can't you fly helicopters? And I said, because I've not been trained. So he sent me to...
Were you the brigadier's aide at that time?
This was after I got actually transferred into a liaison position for
Okay.
naval electronics. I worked for a one-star admiral in Patuxent River, Maryland. He said, if you can fly civilian airplanes, you need to fly helicopters because we couldn't get pilots. Everyone was being sent to Vietnam. So he sent me to transition school in Memphis, and I became a helicopter pilot. I was an E5 in the Marine Corps at the time.
Explain what E5 means to us civilians.
Sergeant. Enlisted rank 5. I got back to Patuxent River, and the Marine Corps and the Pentagon goes, we have a helicopter pilot in Patuxent River, Maryland. He's an enlisted man. How was that possible? Because you can't be a pilot unless you're an officer. So during Vietnam, they had something called LDO, which is limited duty officer. So I got promoted to a first lieutenant as an LDO.
You got promoted from an L5 or an E5 to a
First lieutenant.
First lieutenant.
So my officer rank tracked my enlisted rank. It was called a limited duty officer. They did this during wartime. Same thing in World War II. They did the same thing.
I mean, that's like a 20-year track that you just jumped.
And then, of course, somebody in the Pentagon goes, why do we have a helicopter pilot in Patuxent River, Maryland? He needs to be in Vietnam. So I went to Vietnam.
Well, I guess it's got its upsides. They gave you I got good news and bad news.
Yeah. So when I got out of Vietnam, I went back to Patuxent River and I did experimental landing systems for helicopters, which was the electronics part of it. And I was going to college at the same time. And I got out of the Marine Corps, and I had an opportunity to go to the same job I had in the Marine Corps, just from on the other side of the office. Because
Whoa! But you skipped over the whole Vietnam part. Like,
I think he did that on purpose.
did you do that on purpose? Because
no, my job was to do insertions and removals. I flew a CH-46.
the Chinook.
Yeah, but the Marine Corps Chinook with the single landing gear. My job was to put troops in and get them out. And I was one of those crazy bastards that got them out.
What was your call sign as a pilot?
No call sign.
No call sign? Marine didn't do that?
No, we actually flew A-teams, which was Army, Marine, Vietnamese, and Montagnards.
What's Montagnards?
Montagnards
They were the village people.
Oh.
They were those crazy bastards you hear about that you could be standing next to one of them and blink, and they weren't there, and you didn't know where they went.
They were ninjas.
They were the locals.
They were the locals, and they were
would work with
badass.
they were the indigenous forces.
Yeah,
that
they were just
U.S.
great.
troops would work with.
And if you listened to them, you survived. If you didn't listen to them, you died. I learned that very quickly. If they said, don't land here, we didn't land there. Even though the officer was like, well, we were told to land there. No, you don't understand. He said, don't land there, we're not landing there.
He's from here. He knows the neighborhood. You listen to him.
Yeah,
and
so
traditionally, Montagnards are like tiny men.
yeah, they're like
small.
5'5". Yeah, but they're just don't ever want to screw
Oh,
them.
they get after it.
But I was a crazy bastard that went in and got an A-team no matter where they were. And got shot down twice. Was a prisoner of war for 18 hours.
No kidding.
Yeah, I got shot
That's
down.
a whole podcast.
Right.
Wow.
See, this
Wow.
is. I had to bring him back to this. He just skipped
Yeah,
this
he did.
part.
I told you it was on purpose.
No, I had a job to do, and my job was, as a Marine, was to get people in and get them out. And whatever it took to get them out, we got them out. There was just nobody ever left behind. That was a job. It was an attitude. And in the Vietnam War, that wasn't what they wanted you to do. Okay, it was all political. Some general in Pentagon say, we're going to go here, and you look at local intelligence and go, no, you don't want to go there, Viet Cong division. So why are we going there? And it was like local intelligence was totally ignored. And you had a bunch of young officers who had no concept what they were doing. They're out of OCS, they're there, they don't listen to the locals, they don't listen to the people who had the most experience. You've got a guy who's been there for a year, for 2 years, or on a second tour, who's an enlisted man, a senior enlisted guy. He's survived 2 tours. Pay attention.
Yes, you survive on it's not a matter of chance. It's
skill.
Yeah.
Pay attention. And they just didn't. And I had a commanding officer who him and I didn't see eye to eye because I would do things that he didn't approve of. And we went places we weren't supposed to be. But if the A-team was there, we went and got them out. And we developed tactics that is used today to get a helicopter in quietly, stall your helicopter, drop, land, count 30, get off. I mean, if nobody's on 30, too bad. But the A-teams loved it because they knew if they were in trouble, we would go get them. And I made a lot of friends there, and I have friends that to this day, I got a guy out, and this was in late 72, and I actually started working with him in the early 80s. He was an engineer. And he remembered me. I had no idea who he was. He says,
You guys just found each other randomly?
Yeah, we worked in the same company. But he remembered my name. And he said, you got me out. And he remembered where I got out. We meet every year and just go get drunk.
Get the fuck out.
That's awesome.
What are the odds of that?
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but you make good friends. You make good friends. You see a lot of people die because of stupidity.
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Now, did you have what everybody remembers has the welcoming that you guys got coming home? Was it as brutal as it's been depicted in history? You guys coming home and you guys, being spat on and unrecognized, and was it really as bad as it's been depicted in history?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. What got me through it, and we talk about PTSD today, is my dad was a veteran from World War II. He helped me through it a great deal. During the Gulf War, which is the first war after that, all us Vietnam veterans said, we're not going to allow this to happen. We're the ones that organized the welcome home parties, the gift packs. When a death occurred, the motorcycle, events, the bugler, and everything else. So we agreed as Vietnam veterans because we weren't recognized. In fact, I could not join an American Legion.
Right, because it's not an official war; it's a policing action.
Now they've changed
and
that.
it's a complete manure. And yeah, you're right; they have changed. That's manure.
Do you know why they changed that? Because all the World War II veterans were dying off. There was no longer
there was nobody
left.
Yeah,
That's why they changed it. By the way.
That is manure.
But I wasn't allowed to join an American Legion until 1984, before I was actually recognized. And the Vietnam vets are the ones that said, hey, we're not going to allow this to happen again. And we're the ones that organized the parades and the motorcycle escorts and so forth. We built veterans homes, and I was associated with an American Legion in Massachusetts in the mid-'90s. And we wrote a plan for doing veterans homes to get veterans someplace they could live and get rehabilitated for the homeless. And it's not about giving them a home. It's about giving them a home, giving them a purpose in life, and rehabilitating them. So they had to work. They could work around the house. They could, rake lawns, do laundry, mop, floor, but they had to get paid. And they used that money they got paid to pay for their living expenses and their food. So it was giving them a purpose.
A purpose is very important for anybody.
Yes, you have to give them a purpose for being alive. And also PTSD had somebody to talk to. And today, veterans, even coming back from Afghanistan and in the Iraq War, a lot of them feel isolated because nobody talks to them. Nobody's interested in them.
Well, that's what I feel
We just
like.
had our last podcast with
you had that.
veterans we had 3 veterans from the Iraq War, and it was kind of brought up that maybe this was cathartic for him in particular to talk about it, and certain things that he hadn't even talked to his family, and being surrounded by 2 of his really good buddies who shared the same experience was super helpful to him, and he wanted to acknowledge the people that he had lost during that period of time, and during his military career. So, is there anything that you're promoting or anything that we can shed light on while you have the microphone here? Like, anything
I
that
haven't
we
been
should
as
be-
active in Chicago, primarily because of the work I was doing. In Massachusetts, we were very active in setting up hotlines and actually finding veterans and talking to them whether they called us or not. So we would get a list of all the people who came back, and we would actually call and talk to them, invite them to the Legion, invite them to a picnic, just get them around veterans so they could feel comfortable in sharing their experiences, and also they had somebody to talk to. In Grand Rapids, we did the same thing. I was very active in Veterans Affairs in Grand Rapids. It's just about communication and being there for them. I have a good friend, and Mickey knows him. He comes in the bar. He's very depressed. Afghan war. I call him at least once a week. How you doing? Hey, you want to go out for a beer? Just to let him know that somebody cares. But he also has to open up.
I want to say that many, 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 many civilian Americans care. Many of us care. It's hard. How do we reach out and go talk to people? But the sacrifice that the soldiers, the Marines, the sailors have made on our behalf, we care. I want people that have fought for us, that have gone off overseas, that have seen things that are horrific, that have changed them to understand that we appreciate it and very much we do care. That's important.
I would imagine as first responders, you suffer the same things. You see horrific things. You're asked to do different things. You have a tendency to talk to the people you're with. Veterans have the same thing. It's very hard for them to open up to a civilian. If there's another veteran, though, that's been in the same situation, maybe not in Afghanistan, but in Vietnam or anything else, they'll talk to them because they feel there's a camaraderie.
Well, there is a sense of comfort. Like, with me and Severin, there are things that I could never talk about with certain people, but I know that Severin would know where I'm coming from if I told him certain things. And, I know that Severin, if, he had something that he knew that I could relate to, we could sit down and I'd be able to relate instantly to what he went through.
That's exactly what I was wanting to say.
Yeah, it is that comfort level that we shared the same experience that I would feel comfortable sharing with him.
Exactly.
That I wouldn't with anybody. It's a closed group. I mean, and it's not because we think that we're better. We think it's just that we have that shared experience. And,
you've had, yes.
So, yeah, I mean, that does exist. So I can see that dynamic between you and other veterans, that you guys need to surround yourselves with the people who actually need to talk to you. So is there any program or official thing that, we can let people know about, that they can get behind, get support officially, or is it, try to reach out to these guys?
VFW.
Okay.
Wounded Warrior Project's one of the big ones. They do an excellent job, by the way. I'm very impressed with what they do.
I'm glad you mentioned Wounded Warrior Project. They had gone through their ebbs and flows. They started out, they were great. They kind of sort of imploded, and now they're back and better than ever.
Any 509 charity, okay, runs into problems. The people who start them have good intentions. And being an individual in both in Massachusetts and in Grand Rapids, working with charities and being on the boards of charities and trying to get them started and working with them, it's very difficult.
Well, you're working with a lot of money, and that good intention turns into a business that you weren't intending to deal with.
Yes, exactly,
So
and that's the problem.
It's the learning curve, as you will.
Yeah, it's a learning curve,
Yeah.
and not that, but you do have unscrupulous people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some people chase the money, and they see some money, and they don't care about the cause.
That's
they
correct.
go after it.
Yeah, and that's a problem with any charity.
Sure.
And balancing that fine line between hiring good management and over-exorbitant payroll, right, which most charities face, is delicate. Very, very
it
dark.
should never be. We should never lose fact of the sight of that it's for the veterans and it's to take care of them, and that should be the focus, and that's what.
True, but as any other charity, they do publish a 509 every year. They have to. It's the law. Anybody can go online and look at it. It's public domain. You look at the salaries. If they're spending more than 15, 20% on salaries,
And that's a problem.
that's a problem.
Well, what I've read is,
Sorry.
many charities, like 10% of the income actually goes to the cause, goes to help the people that they're there to help. There's some very big names that are out there that many people donate that I didn't even realize, and I stopped donating to. When you realize, like, hey, for every buck I give, only 10 cents is actually going to help someone. The rest is going to overhead and salary and
Right,
so on
and that's
so
a problem.
forth. That's a huge problem, but that is typical of many charities.
No, that's incorrect. It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, but it is. The
It shouldn't
biggest
be.
ones
Shouldn't
be. We agree that it shouldn't
No,
be.
it shouldn't be. 80%, 75 to 80% should go back for the cause. If you're hiring a CEO at $250,000 a year because he's the CEO and he's raising money, he better be raising $200 million a year.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, it should
If
be
he
a
isn't
small
doing that,
percent.
I'm not paying him $250,000. We lose sight of why charities got started.
They're there to help whatever the cause is, to help
Right.
the person, to help the individual, whatever the cause is, they're there to help that person, not to help the executive.
Exactly. In Grand Rapids, because of Grand Rapids and because you got Tom DeVoster who owns Amway and the Fox family, the Van Allens who also were part of Amway, if you want to start a charity and you go to Dick and the DeVos Foundation and you go, hey, you know what, I'm starting this charity. Here's what we're going to do. I need $50,000. He'll write you a check. You go to the next day, you pick it up and you do it. They never ask for what you did with it. Okay, so that's the key. To do a successful charity, you really have to get the people who have the dedication to stick with it, and you find volunteers. I don't need to pay a CEO $200,000. I can find a volunteer CEO who does that for a living, who's
Who
willing to
already-
contribute his time because he's not doing it.
Because he cares about the cause.
He's
Well,
not
'cause he's
doing it 40
already
hours a
making
week.
that.
Right. He's
Yes.
not doing it 40 hours a week. He might be spending 4 hours a week. He delegates the work to A's. CEOs don't do anything anyway.
No,
Trust me.
right.
I used to be. I'm a CEO. I've been a CEO in 3 companies. We don't do that much. Okay. Not to justify our salary, but as a capitalist, I like the salary. But,
No, it's just totally understandable.
but but in a charity, you're not spending that much money. So unless, like I said, unless the guy's bringing in $200 million, why am I paying him $200,000? And you have to ask that question.
Well, I have to say that we have gotten off track.
Yes, we do.
I think we all agree
Okay,
that
conductor.
we have gotten off track. So,
Shante.
we've done 2 hours, guys.
Almost 3.
We've done 2 hours. It's an hour and 52 minutes.
Oh, the clock is wrong.
The
It's
clock
two
counts.
different clocks.
It's the second
All right.
hour of it.
Okay.
Soundman Bill, edit that out.
I just want to say, Bill, thank you for your service. Man, I'd love to have you in here, and there's so much that I think we just really scratched the surface with you. But
Be glad to.
thank you for all the amazing stories and knowledge. Tony, thank you for setting this up and, being here together, and let us know if there's anything else that I want to do this more. And you're kind of the front man for the whiskey episode. So
I'm just a whiskey guy.
you're the
That's
whiskey
it.
guy. You are our whiskey guy. So thank
You're
you
my
so much.
hero.
Well, thank you for you guys' service because you're on the front lines today. We're not.
Well, we appreciate it. And
appreciate it,
Thomas,
Brandon.
tell everybody where they can find your podcast.
So the podcast, we're available on almost all platforms, SoundCloud, you name it, Apple, YouTube, Facebook, alphakoncepts.com/podcast. You're going to find the Alpha Koncepts podcast where we talk about everything in the gun culture.
And Severin, give us your spiel.
Department 3C, that it's a show about any and everything from a first responder's viewpoint. I love to get feedback, and I love to hear from people of what you want to hear next. So just look for us and look out for us. Department 3C, department3c.com, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere you can find us. And I have had both of these people on my podcast. I have had
Great
Tom, I
podcast.
had Tony. Yeah, I'm gonna have Bill next.
Yeah,
so
get Bill. Bill, here's your opportunity. Plug that Mongolian podcast, buddy.
And say it in Mongolian too.
Actually, yeah, just stay tuned with the Chicagos Bravest, and we'll definitely start the English podcast very soon, and it's the under the name of the Outcast. So yeah.
Thank you for listening in Mongolian.
Сонссон баярлалаа. Бидэнтэй хамт байгаарай.
Exactly. So thanks again. I appreciate everybody. Tune in again when we do this. It's been an amazing podcast. So thanks for listening. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
This has been a Fire and Iron Media production. You have something to say, people want to listen. How's that, Daddy?